A Series of Unfortunate Events is a 2004 film starring Jim Carrey, but I'm getting ahead of myself. A Series of Unfortunate Events is a series of novels that began publication in 1999 with The Bad Beginning, and spans 13 novels ending in 2006 with the appropriately titled The End. The author of the books is a man named Lemony Snicket, a figure who I've had much trouble researching. There is not much information on the elusive brain man. The most I could find is this unauthorized autobiography, but it seems like it's a misnomer, as it scarcely contains any information on Snicket, and the information it does have is contradictory. It largely holds information pertaining to some secret organization, which is of no use to me. But mysterious author aside, the books follow the Baudelaire siblings: Violet, who has the knack for invention; Klaus, a human library, who can perfectly recite anything he reads; and Sunny, a biter. These three siblings are plunged into a life of despair and chaos once they receive the news that their parents have died in a terrible fire.
Your parents, Mr. Poe said, have perished in a terrible fire. They perished, Mr. Poe said, in a fire that destroyed the entire house.
And the cause of all their troubles can be traced back to one man, Count Olaf.
Hello, 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 Count Olaf said in a wheezy whisper.
Count Olaf is after the Baudelaire fortune, and there is nothing he wouldn't do to get his filthy hands on it. The books showcase Count Olaf's various schemes that usually involve him putting on paper-thin disguises that somehow fool the people who are supposed to protect the Baudelaires. A running theme is that well-meaning authority figures can be just as harmful as outright villains if they are ignorant and refuse to listen to others. This is best exemplified with the character of Mr. Poe, the banker in charge of their inheritance. He is always taking the Baudelaires to their next destination in hopes that he finds an appropriate guardian for them. He has a distinct cough and a distinct lack of awareness of the troubles that the Baudelaires are in. Nearly all the adults that the Baudelaires meet are useless to help them, leading them to have to become self-reliant to get out of trouble. The series has a distinct style to it. It has a very gothic tone with a specific feeling of dread that permeates the varied and unusual environments. The time period is purposefully vague, utilizing anachronism, a word which here means having elements from various time periods to confuse the reader. And though it's not an outright fantasy or science fiction narrative, it does feature several outlandish and whimsical elements. This is clearly not the same world as our own. It's a heightened reality, and one of the more well-known aspects of these books is the unreliable narrator, that is Lemony Snicket. Snicket's style can be best described as long-winded and academic. He tends to go on lengthy tangents about his own life or some associates of his to help illustrate what goes on in the story. He often dwells on the details of a person or setting, thoroughly describing their appearance and other characteristics before even naming them. He frequently defines words that the reader might be unfamiliar with, though his definitions usually only apply to the current situation. And if there's one thing to know about Snicket, it's that he doesn't want you to read these books. Snicket is a character in his own right. Despite just being the narrator, he still shows a lot of personality, and you get the feeling that there's a lot more to him beyond what the books show. As the series goes on, the plot and themes become more complex. The first half can be very simplistic and formulaic as far as the plot goes, with a very obvious line between the good guys and the villains. The fifth book, however, complicates this. By this point, we have been introduced to the initials VFD. It isn't until later that it's revealed to be the name of a secret organization whose members include Count Olaf, the Baudelaire's parents, and several other people that they have encountered. The mystery surrounding their parents and VFD is a major driving force through the latter half of the series, and it causes the Baudelaires to start questioning their perception of morality. The Baudelaires themselves start to perform morally questionable actions in order to survive. Conversely, some villains are shown to have more sympathetic qualities. For example, in the 11th book, The Grim Grotto, one of Count Olaf's henchmen is revealed to be related to one of the Baudelaire's allies. This causes him to actually help the Baudelaires, even if it is just this one time. Moral relativism is a strong theme throughout the books, and it makes the claim that people are not wholly good or bad, but more of a combination of the two. The growing complexity of the series really reflects the fact that the Baudelaires, and by extension the audience, are growing up. Like these fictional characters, children in real life will have to grapple with the fact that the world is a lot more complicated than they first realized. Their parents will no longer be these pillars of responsibility and nobility, but just regular old people with their own faults. The books stress the importance of critical thinking, and the only way to combat the evils of the world is to be well-read. It even includes some literary references for people who are well-read, and I think this is an important lesson to teach kids. It might be the reason I gravitated to these books as a kid. From the beginning, it teaches you to disobey authority figures by ignoring Lemony Snicket's pleas to put down the book, and it seems like a lot of kids did, with it selling at least 65 million copies. This is the 48th best-selling book series of all time, which is admittedly not as impressive as Diary of a Wimpy Kid or Goosebumps, but still pretty good. So with this level of success, a feature film adaptation would surely follow. Well, Lemony Snicket's A Series of Unfortunate Events is a 2004 film starring Jim Carrey. After Nickelodeon Movies bought the film rights to the novels, several directors were considered to adapt the series. Directors such as Terry Gilliam, a sexual predator, and oddly enough, Guy Madden. Barry Sonnenfeld was finally chosen to direct, but he left due to budget concerns. Brad Silberling, who previously directed Casper, would soon replace him. The film would become the highest grossing film from Nickelodeon Movies for 6 years, and to this day it's their 5th highest, and it has some pretty respectable, though not great, reviews from critics. So what do I think of it? Well, it's complicated. One thing I want to say right off the bat is that I absolutely love the production design of the movie. Rick Heinrichs did a tremendous job of adapting a whimsically dark world into film. Apparently, the film was shot entirely in sound stages and the backlot of Paramount Studios.
So you're looking at a film that, with again the exception of a couple of background elements, is 100% shot on stages. That means both your exteriors and your interiors.
And they really make the most of it. The sets also work in tandem with the costumes by Colleen Atwood to build this illustrated and theatrical world. They really capture the timeless anachronism of the books, with clashing fashion and technologies, including these monstrosities of cars. Additionally, Thomas Newman delivers an offbeat but captivating score, utilizing his signature style of incorporating unusual instruments. Newman is able to express a range of emotions, from the quirky inventiveness of Violet's theme to the distant hopelessness that the music box conveys when the Baudelaires find their house in ruins. They definitely got the look and feel of the books down, but how did they adapt the story? Emily Browning and Liam Aiken do a fine job as the Baudelaires. I'm not critiquing the Hoffman twins because they're babies. However, this film definitely feels like it's mainly a vehicle for Jim Carrey.
Hello, hello, hello. I am your beloved Count Olaf.
Jim Carrey's Count Olaf is definitely a lot of fun to watch, but it feels more like Jim Carrey playing Jim Carrey than Count Olaf, if that makes sense. He plays the character as this silly, goofy guy, giving Olaf his trademark energetic and over-the-top performance. In fact, a lot of Count Olaf's lines were improvised by Carrey during his screen tests.
And I milked them all day.
It's definitely a fun performance to watch, but it's a far cry from his characterization in the books. While Count Olaf has his funny moments, he is largely played a lot more straight. He is a genuine threat to the Baudelaires, and you can feel this terrifying presence whenever he shows up. Of course, Carrey will always be a joy to watch, but it really lessens the impact of Count Olaf's character. Additionally, the film makes the rather strange choice to adapt the first 3 books into one film. This causes the film to have some pretty disjointed pacing. It sets up an entire story, but before it can fully flesh it out, it moves on to a completely new set piece. It doesn't have enough time to fully adapt one book, so it ends up cutting out quite a bit from them. As a result, a lot of the nuance that the series presents is lost here. There are a few hints towards a larger story here and there, such as the VFD cameo and allusions to a secret society, but it largely falls into the wayside in favor of Jim Carrey's antics. It also adds entirely new scenes to make it fit more with the motion picture format.
structure.
The biggest example of this was the scene where Count Olaf tries to kill the kids with a train. The filmmakers decided to move the climax of The Bad Beginning to the ending of this film, putting it after the events of The Wide Window, the 3rd book. So in order to get the Baudelaires to Uncle Monty, they needed to come up with a new reason why they are removed from Count Olaf.
Allowing a child of Sonny's age to drive a car is simply not good parenting.
I don't really consider this too much of a negative, but it's still interesting to talk about. In addition to this, there are a few changes that aren't anything major, but still annoy me a bit. They decided to do away with Klaus's glasses, likely because they wanted him to look more cool or something. Speaking of Klaus, they made him into this hero in the end, turning Violet into this damsel in distress,
Right hand, please.
which really rubs me the wrong way.
And now Klaus is apparently running off and trying to rescue Sunny. In the book, of course, it is Violet, but I know that Hollywood prefers its female actresses to do very little.
They also heavily imply that Count Olaf caused the Baudelaire mansion fire, something that was left open-ended in the books. Yes, they don't outright state it, but it's still more implied than in the books. It turns a pretty complex and nuanced children's books into a simpler and more lighthearted kids movie. All of this kind of makes for a lousy adaptation. All of this aside, does the film work on its own merits? Like I said, there are a lot of good things going for this film, and if you watch the film without any knowledge of the books, I believe you'll still have a good time. Sure, the pacing is very weird, and it made me feel exhausted by the end of the wide window segment, but it still provides a glimpse into a very fascinating domain. Everything comes together to create a film that is full of personality, and of course Jim Carrey is fun to watch regardless, and the ending where the Baudelaires receive a late letter from their parents is a nice and bittersweet note to leave the movie on. The movie never got a sequel. In the years following the release of the film, there's been talks of a possible franchise based on the rest of the series. However, as the years go on, the likelihood of this happening gets slimmer and slimmer. The actors became too old to portray the Baudelaires, who hardly aged throughout the books. There's been a suggestion to make the sequel a stop-motion animated film, which I would have really liked to have seen, but that never happened. So it seems that all hope is lost for a true adaptation of a series of unfortunate events. So apparently that trailer was fan-made, but the idea is still true. A series of unfortunate events would become a show on Netflix. Airing from 2017 to 2019, this show would serve as the second chance to properly adapt the books. Barry Sonnenfeld would return after his departure from the film as an executive producer and director of 10 episodes, and children's author Daniel Handler, who also got fired from the film, would return to the series. The series would definitely benefit from the new format, as now each book would be adapted into two 45-minute episodes. The extended runtime would allow the filmmakers to go much more in depth than the movie ever could. Not only would they adapt basically everything that happened in the books faithfully, but they would also add new scenes that really flesh out VFD. One thing they did that I really liked was the addition of two characters who were implied throughout the first season to be the Baudelaire's parents. However, spoilers, it's revealed that they were in fact the parents of a separate group of siblings, the Quagmires. They then also die in a fire. The series can be pretty evil sometimes. If the film whet your hunger, the series is the full course meal. Much like the film, the series opts for an artificial look to everything to heighten the reality. However, instead of the more gothic look of the film, the show leans more into the theatrical. Taking inspiration from screwball comedies and adventure serials from the 30s, the series takes on an exaggerated and showy tone, not unlike a stage play. This is reflected especially in the cast's performance. Count Olaf is now played by Neil Patrick Harris.
Hello, 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 children.
And he really emphasizes the thespian side of Olaf. He never feels like he's having a normal conversation, indulging himself into giving monologues. However, he still feels more menacing than Carrie's version of the character, albeit still more lighthearted than in the book.
I didn't realize the sound went so quickly. I bought it online.
As a deviation from the previous versions, Lemony Snicket is now given a face. Patrick Warburton, playing against type, plays the intelligent yet deeply troubled author. Despite mostly associating Warburton with more big and dumb characters, he plays the part of Snicket excellently. He is able to nail the author's monologues and tangents with the dry wit he's known for. The orphans are also pretty good. While Melina Weissman and Lewis Hines are pretty stiff in the beginning, they really come into their own as the series goes on. I also want to note that they only used the one baby, Presley Smith, to play Sonny, which I find pretty impressive. I would be remiss not to mention the production design. I hope that I can showcase the level of craftsmanship on display. I'm impressed with Bo Welch, who served as the production designer, doing things such as conceptualizing the bizarre sets and props for the show. Much like the film, the series opts to get right back into filming primarily in soundstage. A great choice, as I'm sure you know. It adds to the more theatrical tone. Not only does it capture the ambiguous time period well, it really creates a world of its own, one where everything's exaggerated. Sure, there are moments where the CGI is distractingly obvious, but if one thing is true, it's that the show looks beautiful. What the show does that the movie lacks is give depth. I'm talking about delving into the themes from the books and seeing what the film only touched upon. A major theme here is how nobody is strictly good or evil. People are a real complicated mixture of both, like a salad. As it progresses, the series complicates the previously simplistic narrative. which is what the visionaries behind the series incorporate into the main theme. The show might seem to be a series of misadventures, and it can be quite ridiculous at times, but there is more to it than what's on the surface, because at its core, this is about coming to terms with growing up into an uncaring and complicated world, something that rings true throughout each adaptation. However, despite everything, no matter the hardships they go through, the Baudelaires will always have each other, and sometimes that's enough.
If you are interested in stories with happy endings, then you would be better off somewhere else.
Your parents, Mr. Poe said, have perished in a terrible fire.
Perished means killed.
We know what perished means.
I'm taking you to live with your dear Count Olaf. He's either your third cousin 4 times removed or your fourth cousin 3 times removed.
Hello, hello, hello.
These impressions, that Count Olaf was a horrible person, were absolutely correct.
Seize the children.
We're very concerned.
It's the letter. The letter that never came. Dearest children, since we've been abroad, we have missed you all so much. Certain events have compelled us to extend our travels. One day, when you're older, you will learn all about the people we have befriended and the dangers we have faced. At times, the world can seem an unfriendly and sinister place, but believe us when we say that there is much more good in it than bad. All you have to do is look hard enough. And what might seem to be a series of unfortunate events may, in fact, be the first steps of a journey.
No matter how many misfortunes had befallen them, and no matter how many ersatz things they would encounter in the future, the Baudelaire orphans knew they could rely on each other for the rest of their lives. And this, at least, felt like the one thing in the world that was true.
I just spent the last whatever minutes talking about a series of unfortunate events, and both of its adaptations. The books were a favorite of mine as a child, and it's interesting to see the different approaches that the movie and show take to adapt it. It's easy to deem the show as the definitive adaptation. It's very faithful, and what it does change adds so much to the story. However, I wouldn't discount the film completely. Sure, Jim Carrey takes up most of the spotlight, but it still offers a good taste of what the series is like. If anything, it's at least entertaining enough for children, and it offers a good lesson. But at the end of the day, the best way to experience the story is through the books. They are some of the finest written children's literature out there, offering an intriguing and mysterious universe that contains more than what the surface suggests. All of it in an amusingly offbeat style that will keep you on your toes. And if nothing else, it will teach you a ton of words, such as aberrant, which means very